tonight, fire tore through a historic building on the Northern Peninsula. That story and...
Cape Spear is renowned for its rugged beauty. But once again, the ocean has claimed the life of another person who ventured too close to this unforgiving shoreline.
Stand away from the rocks on the grass and use a zoom lens. You can smell that ocean a long way away.
I'm Terry Roberts. I'll have that tragic story coming up.
People in this community say they are tired of Band-Aid solutions, that they want a seat at the table when it comes to those conversations around coastal erosion and what to do about it.
So why not do it all, fix it right in the first spot?
That story coming up.
Mackenzie has to be out by the end of the month, and my aunt's on the phone and she's like, it's the 18th, so in 12 days, and she's like, yeah.
A St. John's woman found out the city was kicking her out of her home the day her mom died of cancer.
This is CBC Here and Now.
Welcome to Here and Now. Once again, warnings are being issued in this province about the dangers of venturing too close to the shoreline. This follows a tragic incident at Cape Spear yesterday, where the search for a missing woman was still underway this afternoon. Terry Roberts reports.
Cape Spear is a Parks Canada National Historic Site, the country's most easterly point of land, home to the oldest surviving lighthouse in Newfoundland and Labrador. Thousands of visitors are lured here each year, drawn by the ruggedness, the vast ocean, world-class hiking trails. But sadly, this is not an unfamiliar scene at Cape Spear. Eagle-eyed searchers combing the shoreline as winds rage and the ocean churns. Just after 4 o'clock on Wednesday, the call came in. A man and a woman ventured beyond all the signs, the warnings, toward the hazards, beyond the marked trail and the viewing platforms, and were swept into the ocean by the unpredictable sea. The man overcame the forceful waves and the rocky, slick shoreline. He was taken to hospital in an ambulance and later released. The woman is missing. The search continued today, with rescuers hoping for a miracle, but well aware that once you're in the grips of these waves, this frigid water, this unforgiving shoreline, that the chances of survival are slim.
Experience has told me if you go into that water, it's highly unlikely anyone can get you out of it.
They've seen it all before in the nearby village of Blackhead. There are reminders of the dangers, of past lives lost. So when they hear the sirens and see helicopters in the air, hearts skip a beat.
Because you know that there's a strong probability someone has gone into the water.
Unfortunately, it's happened before, so it hits you that way, I guess.
The East Coast Trail is a world-class coastal hiking path. Part of it runs through Cape Spear. It's a safe wilderness corridor, but only if you stay on the path.
Our message is be aware of where you are. Be aware of your surroundings. The path is there. It's designed to keep you safe.
Stand away from the rocks on the grass and use a zoom lens. You can smell that ocean a long way away, but don't go on the rocks, because the ocean I would never be able to predict where that ocean is always all of a sudden going to have some kind of a rogue wave even that will take you out.
But it's human nature to explore, to venture further, to want to feel the power of the ocean. But the consequences can also be deadly. Terry Roberts, CBC News, Cape Spear.
Now to St. Anthony, where an iconic building has been destroyed by fire. The 100-year-old landmark is one of the historic Grenfell properties in the Northern Peninsula town, and before the fire was home to the Boys and Girls Club. The area's MHA spoke with CBC Radio about the loss this morning.
I know very little at this point about what had happened there, but I do know that it was a huge fire, and we have an incredible volunteer fire department here in St. Anthony, and they have mutual aid agreements with communities in the periphery, and those communities were called upon last night as well, and everybody came together made a very solid effort to contain that fire and to ensure the safety of the surrounding structures as well as the community and the people here. So a big thank you to those folks who were well into the early hours of the morning who were doing the work on that property. It's an incredible resource. It's a place where kids can go to feel supported. They learn so much about themselves. They learn how to work with others, and it's just a special place here in St. Anthony. And, you know, while it's devastating to see the last of the building, that's not necessarily what made that place so special. It's the people. It's the folks that work there. It's the people who are so passionate about making this work here in our small community. They offer programming that's comparable to some of the largest cities in the country on a very small budget, and it's because people believe in the Boys and Girls Club. The community rallies behind them and supports them, and they do incredible things for boys and girls here in St. Anthony and in the surrounding area. So the question that we're working on here today, we know that there's so many children and families who rely on the Boys and Girls Club, and it's an incredible child growth and development organization, but it also, you know, provides after-school programming. So we've got a number of kids today who don't really know what was supposed to happen after school, but a big shout out to the folks at White Hills Academy. The administration there has opened up the school after school today, and kids who would normally have been transferred to the Boys and Girls Club can stay at the school until we figure out an alternate solution. So it just so happens that that's right in my wheelhouse in the Department of Education. So I'm working with the staff in our department to figure out if there's a longer term solution that we can work on as the Boys and Girls Club figure out what their next step is. But undoubtedly, the community will stand behind this organization as they've done so many times before.
Well, now to Labrador. Former MP Peter Panashaway is feeling relieved today after mischief charges against him were withdrawn in provincial court. The CBC's Reagan Burden has more.
March last year, Peter Panashaway in handcuffs, arrested for smashing car windows. It was parked at a house that he says he bought for his son and grandchildren in Jeji. Panashaway says he lashed out because he found out it became a drug house.
The house that we had purchased for our grandkids and Ben became a drugstore. And both Marianne and I were very unhappy with that, and we took a stand. And the morning of this incident, I had told them to leave the house, and that that we would not be supporting the selling cocaine from the property. And I also told them that if they didn't leave, that I would break the vehicles in front of the house.
Panashaway says there was nothing else he could do. He felt that the Band Council, the RCMP, and the government were not doing enough to stop what he calls the drug problem in Jeji. So he took a stand.
Everyone in the community is concerned. Everyone even in Goose Bay is concerned. You would not believe how many people called me in Goose Bay to support me for taking a stand. And but no one knows what to do, how to go about dealing with all the drugs that are coming into the community, and my community, but also in the community of Happy Valley Goose Bay. And it's a big concern.
Panashaway says elders are scared, parents are worried about what their children are being exposed to, and everyone is frustrated.
I think we need to take a stronger position. We need to take a very strong position and start fighting all the drugs and trafficking that takes place in Labrador. Well, it's a problem not just in Labrador, but it's a problem in my community, in Labrador, in Newfoundland, and everywhere else. And if we don't take a position as a community, then we don't have very much to look forward to.
Of his 4 children, Panashaway says only one has never been involved in drugs. Others in Jeji are in similar situations, unsure what to do and who to call. He and his wife care for 2 grandchildren and worry about their future.
What future do these young girls have if that's the future that we see now? How do we prepare them to avoid that kind of dark side of life? And it's challenging. I mean, if I'm thinking about it, then there's other parents and grandparents that are thinking about it. And so we need to have a serious conversation, and we need to have the We need to have everyone working together.
Panashaway says there's work to do, but with stricter enforcement and punishments for drug dealers, he's hopeful for the future of his community. Reagan Burden, CBC News, Happy Valley Goose Bay.
Still in Labrador, after almost 2 weeks, search and rescue efforts for a missing woman in Nain have been called off. 51-year-old Elizabeth Gerarcy was last seen on December 30th. Today, the RCMP says that after 12 days of extensive searching, the efforts are exhausted. Police say everything has been tried to find Gerarcy, including ground, aerial, and underwater searches. The investigation will remain open as a missing person case. In other news, the province's immigration minister says she's been blindsided by a federal decision to cut economic immigration spaces in half. Sarah Studley says she received the bad news in a letter from Ottawa last night. Here now's Mark Quinn reports.
A complete change, like drastic cuts. Like, we are gobsmacked and shocked.
The federal government controls the number of economic immigration spaces each province has annually. Last year, this province had 3,050, but this year it will have half of that.
There will be businesses who are using our economic immigration programs today to make their businesses run. And so they are going to have significant implications when they can no longer use these economic immigration programs to recruit people to work in their businesses.
And Studley says it's not just businesses that will be harmed.
So the cuts in the letter from Minister Miller will absolutely affect healthcare recruitment.
Last year, this province recruited more than 700 immigrants to work in healthcare.
If you look at the nurses that we've recruited recently, 90% of those nurses are working outside of St. John's. So not only will this have a dire impact on healthcare recruitment, this will impact rural Newfoundland as well. Like, this is where we're getting the nurses to work in rural Newfoundland, is from our economic immigration spaces.
The cut means the province will have to make some difficult choices.
Healthcare recruitment is, I would say, one of the top priorities. We need doctors and nurses and social workers and child psychologists. And now we're going to have to ruthlessly prioritize those with people to build houses, early childhood educators, key business roles that local businesses need to survive. It's going to have significant consequences.
The Nurses Union says this cut underscores the message it's been sending government for years.
We've been talking about a focus on retention, and right now the government is going to have to pivot, and LHS needs to pivot, and I think this is the impetus for them to now focus on retention, because if we're not going to be able to recruit internationally the number that we could have recruited last year, we cannot afford to lose one registered nurse or nurse practitioner or any other healthcare worker for that matter.
Studley says she's hoping to speak with the federal immigration minister, and she also says she's planning to meet with businesses that rely on economic immigrants. Mark Quinn, CBC News, St. John's.
Now, in an email to Radio Canada, the Federal Immigration Department says that while immigrants are essential for Canada's economy, pressure on housing, infrastructure, and social services have made the cut necessary. In reaction to the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas announced yesterday continues, the agreement will pause fighting in Gaza and see the release of hostages. One Memorial University professor says it's a positive step in this conflict and potentially for the region overall.
I was always hopeful, but the signs, the winds were not shifting in that direction, it seemed, for a very long time. In combination with the fact that you had a lot of right-wing politicians in Netanyahu's government quite openly saying that they opposed any kind of ceasefire deal. So I'm thrilled to see one. I think it's imperative for Israel to get their hostages back, to figure out how to move forward with the process. And to see what they can do now as they want to move forward in their conflict with Hamas and some of their neighbors.
Well, we've had an area of low pressure just offshore most of the day today, bringing some flurries to parts of the Avalon. Another area of low pressure to the north, but really some much colder air in play, especially up across Labrador. If we take a look at the weather on the way, headlines, essentially more flurries will continue as we head through tomorrow, but the weekend is going to feature some warm conditions as well as some significant rain. We'll get into all the details coming up a little later.
Well, there's a road in a West Coast community that looks like it's about to fall into the sea. Storm after storm, it continues to crumble, and while there have been attempts to fix it, people who live there say it's nothing more than Band-Aid solutions. Leila Baudouin reports.
It's a pavement all there. Oh, it was brutal. And the wind just came up that morning. And the wind was northwest, almost like a perfect storm.
This road in Fox Island River, Point O'Mall, took its latest hit last week. Local diver Eve Leroy says driving on the edge of a road crumbling into the ocean is nothing new to residents.
The water will wash right clean over this here and go on the opposite side.
We're after having a lot of devastation here. Our roads, our wharf is condemned. We've got to be steady doing dredging stuff here every year.
A hard go for a community that's connected to the ocean for survival.
I think 6 longliners here plus a big 50-footer here. So in order for us to keep making a living here, we got to have something done.
When I grew up, the bank was probably about 150 feet that way.
Just how much has the water levels risen? Leroy remembers his wedding day in 2012, standing on a rock 8 feet from the shoreline, which would now be completely submerged in water.
One time we had harsher winters, so this time of the year, this would be all frozen with ice and protected.
Leroy says without that packed ice, nature's own protection wall, they're extra vulnerable.
We get, 11, 12 months of the year that it takes a steady pounding.
There's been several government-fueled projects to fix and save the road and protect the harbor, including a channel wall and breakwater reconstruction. But people here say they haven't had a seat at that decision-making table.
The rock they put there, it's just not big enough.
And materials used to secure the crumbling wall aren't working either. The Leroys want the province to talk with locals before doing anything else.
Like, we've been living here all of our life. We know what this harbour does, what happens with this river and stuff like this here. We've been after government years and years and years to get stuff done that we know that would fix the problem, but it comes back to engineers. They says it won't fix the problem. And that's what we end up fighting all the time, most of the time.
I've been at this, the first stories in 2011, 2012. So now we're 13, 14 years later, and we're still doing stories about it. And if you add up all the money that has been paid out here in the last little while, over the years, if they did it once, we wouldn't be having this interview.
You can't tell me somebody, wherever they're to, whatever company they are, is an engineer or whatever, and he's going to draw something on a piece of paper and come down saying this is how this works. Yeah. It don't work that way.
What's working? Not this. With storms so strong they're washing away pavement like grains of sand, this road continues to crumble, and the community to call for action, or at least a voice in what happens next in an attempt to save it. Leila Baudouin, CBC News.
Well, the Public Utilities Board has rejected a Newfoundland Power application to increase customer prices. The company wanted to hike the rate by 10.6% as of July 1st, but the PUB turned it down. Instead, the board has told Newfoundland Power to reduce its operating costs by $2 million over the next 2 years and to revise its proposal based on a lower return rate. And in other news, the fiery landing of a PAL plane in Halifax late last year was due to a blown tire. That's according to a Transportation Safety Board release today. According to the TSB, it happened during takeoff in St. John's on December 28th, but wasn't noticed by the crew. And the flight, operated by Air Canada, continued on. When the plane landed in Halifax, the left side landing gear collapsed, and then the left propeller then struck the runway and the left engine caught fire. There were no injuries among the 73 passengers and 4 crew members. The TSB investigation is continuing. Well, before we get to the weather, just have a look at this beautiful egret. This video was shot just yesterday in Paradise.
Yes, Judy Reed was walking in Elizabeth Park area and spotted this rare sight. A great egret, a bird that's usually seen in Florida, but should be down south right now. They're about 3 feet tall and a 6-foot wingspan.
Yes, I spoke with bird watcher Bruce McTavish yesterday about this milder winter we're having and how birds like this shouldn't be in the province right now. Thank you so much, Judy, for sharing this video with us. Really appreciate it. And such a beautiful animal, and I just wish there was some way to keep her safe during this winter, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, you know, we haven't seen too much snow, but it's definitely coming.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that there is that warm up coming this weekend, so that's, I guess, a good thing for the birds.
For now, and then after that, temperatures drop dramatically as we head into next week. Let's take a look at where we're at right now. Now, we did see a few flurries and even some freezing drizzle earlier today for parts of the metro area. Right now, still just some cloudy skies sitting at -1, and those winds are generally out of the north, gusting as high as about 46 kilometers per hour right now. And again, that's thanks to the area of low pressure that is sitting just offshore. Most of the island is sitting below zero, with the exception of southern areas of the Avalon, as well as Bonavista. Vista. And then we've got some cold air up across Labrador, currently -22 in Churchill Falls, and that temperature is going to continue to drop as we head through the overnight. There's that area of low pressure. It did move a little further towards the province today, which is why we saw some of that snow earlier today, but we definitely have that cold pocket of air up across Labrador. That is going to hang tight as we head through to most of the weekend for most. But there's a look at that snow right there. It is now tapering off a little bit, but we'll continue to see that potential for some snow, some flurries, I should say, as we head through the overnight tonight. And that's pretty much it as far as the weather goes. Labrador just going to be cold and quiet through the night, maybe seeing a few flurries for western areas of the island as we get towards the early morning hours. But for the most part, temperatures will be chilly. -24 tonight in Happy Valley Goose Bay. We're sitting about -22, maybe a little bit lower than that in Lab City. And again, a little bit of a wind chill, so those wind chills will feel more like the low -30s tonight. Towards the coast, those temperatures will be sitting in the -teens. Now, other than from, say, Gander through to the Avalon, temperatures will be a little milder, so between -1 and -3, but the rest of the island will sit between -7 and -12 tonight with generally light winds. Now, because of that area of low pressure, they're going to stay about 30 to 50 kilometers per hour along the northeast coast out of the northwest. Into tomorrow, quiet for the most part. Again, we may see a few flurries in the mix. Some sunshine certainly possible for parts of the island as well. Don't be surprised to see that. You may need your sunglasses at times tomorrow afternoon. Up across Labrador, again, another quiet day expected. We may see a few flurries, especially as we head towards the overnight for Lab West, as we see our next weather maker move in, but they'll likely not move in until we get to early Saturday morning. Temperature-wise, again, hovering around the 0-degree mark, maybe a little bit above for the Avalon. Winds will be out of the northwest again tomorrow, between 20 to 40 kilometers per hour. Otherwise, minus single digits the story. And again, a few flurries in the mix, nothing too significant for now. And then for Labrador, at least the southeast, you're going to hang out in the minus single digits tomorrow, but we do have those temperatures hanging out somewhere between -11 to -15 for the rest of the big land. Southwesterlies will be gusting or around 20 to 30 kilometers per hour, but again, that potential for some flurries in the west. Now, our next weather maker is going to move in as we head towards Sunday and then into Monday, already prompting a special weather statement from Port aux Basques through to Burgeo. Significant rain is likely, which is not great at this time of the year because, you know, ground is frozen and it has the inability to absorb some of that rain. So as we head through Sunday, that's when we should see the majority of the rain. You can see on the future tracker here that some of it will be, or likely will be, heavy at times. It's also going to bring some mild temperatures across the island. We may see some milder temperatures up across parts of Labrador as well, reaching, above zero. Some of you may see some rain in the mix there, and then temperatures are going to plummet as we head into the rest of the week. I'll get into all of that coming up a little later.
Thanks, Ashley. Well, a young woman is facing eviction from a St. John's nonprofit housing unit. This comes shortly after the death of her mother, who held the lease. Mackenzie Stevenson says she's being unfairly removed from the home she's lived in for almost her whole life. Here Now's Maddie Ryan has that story.
This house is part of the City of St. John's nonprofit housing division, but for this young woman, it's home. 21-year-old Mackenzie Stevenson has been living in this 3-bedroom house for 17 years. In November, her mother, Michelle, passed away from cancer. The same day, Stevenson found out her time living here might come to an end.
It was actually my aunt who called, and she was like, hello, Michelle Stevenson has passed away. Just want to make sure Mackenzie can still live here. We want to change the lease over to Mackenzie's name. And they're like, no. Basically, immediately they're like, Mackenzie has to be out by the end of the month. And my aunt's on the phone and she's like, it's the 18th, so in 12 days. And she's like, yeah, you're not the leaseholder, so you can't live in this house. So I'm so confused. The funeral was on Friday and I was losing my house on Monday.
This came as a shock, so Stevenson pushed back. She says her mother called the city to add her to the lease last summer, but nothing was signed. She was only an occupant. After contacting city councilors, Stevenson eventually got an extension until January 31st, but she says it's not enough.
It's almost like they're looking at me just because of my age, and because I'm a single young woman, it might be easy for me to go get an apartment somewhere, but we all know the prices of apartments right now. It's difficult. And yes, I know I work 2 part-time jobs, but like I said, I'm also in school full-time, so I don't have the option to work as much as I want to.
The City of St. John's is refusing to answer CBC's questions due to privacy concerns, but emailed a statement. When a lease owner passes, the lease is terminated effective immediately. The housing division may offer an extension should the family members living in the unit need more time to find a place to live. The city also explained that the housing division follows the Residential Tenancies Act when it comes to evictions, but it has its own process when a lease owner dies, which is different from an eviction. Stevenson says that was never explained to her.
Nobody from the city has bothered to contact me directly and be like, hey, Mackenzie, you have to be out of your house January 31st. I thought it was a whole process.
Despite the chaos, Stevenson is holding on to the memories scattered throughout this house. She says being here alone is hard, but leaving would be harder.
I moved in here when I was 4. I can remember sitting at the kitchen table out there and blowing out my 5th birthday candles. It hasn't even been 3 months since my mom passed away, so I sit here some days and I wait for her to come down over the stairs. I wait for her to join me at the supper table. But instead, I just sit there and I eat my supper without her,
Stevenson has been paying rent since November. There's just over 2 weeks until she has to leave, but she's still holding out hope. Maddie Ryan, CBC News, St. John's.
And if we remove some of these guardrails, remove some of these barriers to misinformation and disinformation, it can lead to really bad consequences because we just don't have the tools we need then to make sense of the political world around us. It's really challenging.
Meta is eliminating fact-checking on platforms like Facebook and Instagram in the United States. We'll speak with a political science professor about what that could mean for public discourse and democracy. That's coming up. Well, some big changes coming to some of the most popular social media websites. Recently, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced that the company is scrapping fact-checking in the United States from its platforms, including Facebook and Instagram, and it's loosening its rules around hate speech.
First, we're going to get rid of fact-checkers and replace them with community notes, similar to X, starting in the US. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse. What started as a movement to be more inclusive has increasingly been used to shut down opinions and shut out people with different ideas, and it's gone too far.
So what does all of this mean for users of the platforms, for public discourse, and for politics? Joining me now is Amanda Bittner, a political science professor at Memorial University. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi there, my pleasure.
So what was your first reaction when you heard about these changes?
Like a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I study voters, elections, and public opinion. So how people think about politics, how people think about the world around them, how they engage with information, and how they process that information and then turn that into decision making at the ballot box or whatever. And information is this key thing that we as voters, as citizens, rely upon in the world, and it has become already increasingly difficult to understand the world around us. Life is complex, but also the media environment's complex. We now not only have, traditional news outlets like CBC, but we also have tons of social media outlets giving us different kinds of information. And so weeding through all of that is challenging in the first place. Weeding through all of that with the new technological changes that have led to bots, that have led to total fake news, that have led to editing of videos to make them not even real. Like, we're being presented with and not even just presented, inundated with tons of information all the time. Much of it is like garbage. And so we rely upon companies, governments, and other kind of information providers, which includes actually party leaders and political parties too, to help us as voters navigate the political world. And if we remove some of these guardrails, remove some of these barriers to misinformation and disinformation, it can lead to really bad consequences because we just don't have the tools we need then to make sense of the political world around us. It's really challenging.
What kinds of speech will people be exposed to now that they weren't before?
spectrum of bad that's possible now is actually quite large. One of the things that I always tell my students is that, our brains process information in ways that we don't always control, right? So you encounter somebody new, your brain does a whole bunch of stuff, shortcuts, all these kinds of things before you even think about what you're thinking. So with that means that as we absorb information, whether it's real or not, it enters into our mind, enters into our worldview, and if it matches pre-existing worldviews, then we absorb it more easily. So if we're encountering a world where hate speech is the norm, that's a bit frightening, because that means that we then integrate those ideas into our worldview even more. So these effects can compound. So what I think we've seen over the last, let's say, 10 years has been a real move towards citizens struggling with misinformation and disinformation, political leaders propagating misinformation and disinformation. And this is dangerous because we have, as voters, we have lives, we have jobs, we have families, we have things to do besides think about politics all the time. And that's reasonable. And even as a political scientist who loves politics, I think it's okay for us to have other things to do, and that's important. And so as life has become more challenging, survival is more difficult. Just feeding your family is more challenging than it was 10 years ago. It's really hard to just make your life work on a daily basis, never mind trying to suddenly become a fact checker yourself as well. And so the job of being a citizen, the job of being a voter has become much, much harder, and folks out there are not making it easier for us with this.
Mark Zuckerberg called this like a new era for social media, and says this is largely about getting back to the company's roots around free expression. Is there any validity to that? That's something, free expression is something that we value, but in the sphere of social media, it takes a different kind of form. What do you think about that, his reasoning for doing this?
So I think that his reasoning is fake news. So I think two things. Yes, going back to the company's roots. What were the company's roots for Facebook? It was an app that was created by university students to judge how hot women were. So yeah, they're going back to that. Great. What a wonderful improvement on our lives, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is, going back to our roots, they are trying to make money. It is a company. It is capitalism. And so it is cheaper not to fact check. And so on one level, he's being honest in that he's saying, we don't want to do news. We don't want to make sure that people are safe. We don't want to make sure that people are feeling free to express themselves in any way whatsoever. We want to ensure that people can judge others if they want to, because that's the roots of Facebook. We want to ensure that we can make as much money as possible, which is why they're donating to Trump's campaign, which is why they're making the choices that they're making. So he's not totally being dishonest. It's just that he's also not really telling the truth. If he really cared about information and people not just expressing themselves but engaging with real stuff, he would let real stuff unfold, and he's not. So
this is such a dense topic and there's so much we could talk about, but just one more thing I'm wondering about is, what can the Canadian government do? Because Meta says that this is something that they're doing in the United States first, but they plan to expand across the world into other countries. What kind of rules can the Canadian government put in place to help curb some misinformation online?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's important to remember that governments are here to work for us, to protect residents, to ensure that we all can navigate the world safely and with health and so on and so forth. So there's lots of examples of places around the world where more stringent requirements for companies exist. And governments are the regulators of the political world, but also of the corporate world and so on. So the Canadian government could create whatever rules it wants to ensure that fact-checking is required. And so while Meta has lightened its load in terms of fact-checking in the US, where the rules aren't very strict, it has to comply with the regulations of various countries around the world. And so we know, for example, in the European Union, the regulations are much more stringent. And so it's got to abide by those rules there. So if Canada had strict rules, then it would have to abide by our rules as well. And so I think that's one thing that we can never forget, is that governments can take back their power and can regulate even very large, powerful corporations to ensure that citizens are safe and that we're receiving the information that we need and that we're able to navigate the very complex political world around us.
Amanda Bittner, thank you so much for coming in. Really
Thanks.
appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Well, in a panel on CBC Radio's The Signal earlier today, provincial politicians discussed everything from the Churchill Falls MOU to U.S. tariff threats and 3 upcoming elections this year. Here's part of that debate.
As the minister said, and it's been said in the House, we always go back to Muskrat Falls. Well, we ought to have learnt the lessons from Muskrat Falls. I didn't vote on Muskrat Falls. I will say this. It was an idea that was put forward and executed by the current Liberal government. And at the end of the day...
You know that's not true. You didn't read the... Go back to the LeBlanc report. 2013, that shit was sailed. Now, you know this, Lloyd.
So if we were to have that same inquiry today, tell me what it would say.
It would say the same thing that it said 4 years ago.
So all of that aside, the fact that there is no independent outside review of this, we haven't learned the lessons. That's my point.
Your opinion.
The next thing I would say is that the people that were there in that room being questioned clearly said, without Muskrat Falls, this wouldn't have happened. This is all under the Muskrat Falls EA. All of the groundwork and foundation has been laid because of Muskrat Falls, and that Gull Island could not go ahead without, not at the speed that they're saying Quebec needs it. So there's a whole lot of other things.
There's a whole lot of history here. We could go back to the deal that was originally done by Premier Grimes that got scuttled. We can go back to the conversations that led to Muskrat. But I'm coming back to the point. You know as well as I do, to say that the Liberals executed this project in the contracts, you know that is patently false. You know that. Now, you can say that the recommendations were not followed because, you know, that's your opinion. But to say the otherwise would go literally against what Justice LeBlanc said in massive stacks of documents and in an executive summary. And yes, I'd like to think we learned the lessons. Believe me, we paid enough for them. And I know you weren't involved in it. I mean, geez, I'm not implying that. In fact, there's no one on that side except for your House leader who, he wasn't an elected member, but like he says in the House all the time, he was around. You guys weren't there. But I tell you what, we sure as hell learned the lessons from this. I mean, believe me, it's still it guides just about every decision because it's like it's still fresh on everybody's mind. All of our constituents still... They use that now as the term to compare it to everything else. If you were to do something bad now, Muskrat Falls.
Many places in Canada rely on propane to heat their homes, but some Superior Propane customers in the Maritimes are frustrated after their tank rental fees were hiked. The company says the affected customers weren't using enough of the product. Angela McIver reports.
When Patricia Jodry bought her propane fireplace 4 years ago, she had a plan to turn it on only in emergencies. Then last summer, Superior sent her an email.
Due to the infrequent propane deliveries, we need to increase the equipment rental rate to ensure fairness and sustainability. The notice that I got was like very cold. You know, like, shame on you because you didn't use our propane enough. And because of that, we're going to raise the price. We're going to double it.
She wasn't the only one. Matthew Savoie received the same notice with an increase of 50%.
Bit of a shock, bit of a surprise. Definitely got me a little bit angry, a little heated, and definitely something I wanted to deal with.
The price jump is solely for the equipment rental. When the tank is filled, the cost of propane is a separate expense. CBC has been contacted by more than 20 additional customers who also received a letter and were upset. All of them tell me they have since canceled their contract with Superior because of the price jump. In a written statement, Superior says its rental fees are adjusted when tanks become inactive or are used minimally for extended periods of time. These changes help offset the rising costs associated with maintaining and inspecting equipment while complying with regulations and reinforcing our commitment to safety. Superior also said the cost to purchase new propane storage has increased significantly in recent years. But this consumer advocate doesn't buy it.
It's a classic case of big companies squeezing customers for the benefit of shareholders. It's unfair, and there should be rules against this.
Both Savoie and Jodry switched companies at no cost, but Savoie says after 2.5 months of waiting, Superior picked up his tank. Angela McIver, CBC News, Halifax.
right, time for a look at the long-range forecast, and we have that warm-up coming on the weekend, but then you mentioned that there's going to be a drop in the temperature after that.
Yes, there will be a big drop in temperatures, beginning of next week. Well, let's say Tuesday is when we'll see that. Let's take a look at what's going on until we get there. So Friday evening and into Saturday, we're going to see some snow move in up across parts of Labrador into the afternoon hours. It'll spread across the Big Land, and there's not a whole lot to talk about weather-wise across the island. In fact, there should be some sunshine, just clouds late day for most of the west coast, and eventually we'll see those clouds move in through the overnight into Sunday morning out ahead of that area of low pressure. But for now, your Saturday looks pretty decent. 0 degrees for Port aux Basques. Otherwise, temperatures will sit a little bit below 0. Marystown, you should actually be a little bit above 0 through the day on Saturday. And then Labrador, we're going to start to see a little bit warmer temperatures into the minus single digits, at least compared to what we've been seeing for the past few days. Nain, you're going to stay in the minus double digits at about minus 12 through the day on Saturday. Now, by the evening hours and then into Sunday, this is when the meat and potatoes of the storm really start to move in. So we will see some milder air associated with that. Eventually, by the time we get into Sunday morning, still hanging on to the potential for some snow, though, up across Labrador. It does look like the rain-snow line will be in the southeastern portions of the Big Land. And then we may see some mixing on Saturday up across Happy Valley, Goose Bay, but this will be a mainly rain event, especially for southwestern portions of the island. Environment Canada has that special weather statement in effect, and temperatures are going to be well above 0, between 3 and 6 degrees on Sunday, even warmer though as we head into Monday. So temperatures for southeastern Labrador as well as Happy Valley, Goose Bay will sit above 0 as well, around 2 or 3 degrees. Now, look at that big warm up on Monday. More rain moving, or at least the rain will move further east. Temperature near 9 degrees and then drop to about +2 by Tuesday. And we will see some flurries associated with that. And then for Central, you're also looking at that big warm up on Monday, dropping down to -7 for Tuesday. And your overnight lows will get into the minus teens by the time we get into Tuesday night. And then for Western Newfoundland, a fairly big swing in temperatures for you as well. But the snow squalls will kick in as we head into Tuesday and really for the rest of the week, which is good news for those of you who like skiing. And then for Eastern Labrador, you're looking at potentially a switch over to rain for Sunday, Monday snow. And then we really see that drop in temperatures as we head into Tuesday. Same thing for Western Labrador, -20s for Monday and Tuesday. Our weather photo of the day is Beachy Cove Hill. Take a look at this cool shot. That is some snow flurries happening out in the distance. I love it when you can see those happening. Nancy captured this photo and shared it with us. Thank you so much for that. If you have any weather photos, send them to nlphotos@cbc.ca.
Oh, that's a great shot. Thank you. Someone looks like a kind of like a mushroom.
It does. That's what you see. You see snow squalls. Well, snow squalls often look like that too, right?
Yeah,
It's very cool.
9 degrees on Monday.
Yep.
It's amazing.
Big drop in temperatures.
Yeah, huge. Wow.
Big swing.
Very dramatic. Okay, well, that is it for us. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Hope you can join us again tomorrow.
Good night.